Welcome everybody. Just a quick reminder that anything you see on this channel is advice and done in a purely entertainment capacity only. I'm just a guy working on his stuff that breaks in his front yard. That's it. There are no warranties implied or given. This is just me working on junk, passing on what I've learned. End disclaimer. Good afternoon, everybody out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this episode, we're going to attempt to change out the expansion valve that meters freon in the rear air conditioning unit of my 1997 Ford E-150 5.4 liter Econoline van that has been Starcraft converted. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, firstly, if you are here because you have a standard Econoline, you can go ahead and go, because this does not have a standard rear air conditioner. It has a third-party rear air conditioner installed by a company called ProAir. They did it on behalf of Starcraft whenever Starcraft converted this van. So, step one, we got to take this off so we can actually see what we're working with, right? Now, there is a grate that mounts here. There are 4 screws for it, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They are Phillips. Has to come off because there is an anchor screw right here, also Phillips. It goes into the sheet metal of the floor pan that holds this thing in place. So you got to take this off, take that off, and then you have 1, 2. It's hiding in the corner back here, but there's a 3. It's gonna be tricky to do this with everything folded up. And then 4 in the deep dark corner up here next to your seatbelt. So you get those all out, they're Phillips, and then this will just, if you can wiggle it out, just like that. Here we go. So this is the actual, this particular model is the way it works is it's a evaporator / heater core inside of here. I've had this open before. It's 2 sides of the same coin, so to speak. And the way that the air conditioner works is you cut off the flow of coolant to the heater core. That cools down, lets the air conditioning side do its thing. And you get cold air coming from those 4 rear vents you see up there. The problem is that it's only blowing at, I don't know, 55 degrees. And I suspect it should be blowing colder. Now, our prime suspect here is this guy. This is the expansion valve. And how he works, I'm gonna wait to explain that until I can get the rest of this paneling out of the way, because there's a probe that we need to look at. It's really hard to see until you get the paneling out of the way to fully explain how this guy works. But switching him out, in theory, is not that hard. We need to drain all the freon, R134A in this case, out of the system. We need to bust that loose. And we need to bust that loose. We need to unwrap the probe, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then you just take it out and you put your replacement in, and that is that. But the main job of this valve is to meter or control how much freon is flowing through here to the evaporator to do the whole cool down, cool down the air maneuver. So if this is clogged, some of them actually have little nets inside to catch junk. If the diaphragm back here, if that's worn out, it just doesn't do its job as well, and it doesn't meter right, and things don't blow cold. So first thing we got to do that's going to be required to really get all this out is this panel here has to come down. This big panel goes all the way up here there are some screws that are hidden up back there, because I have had this off before, that we're gonna have to get to. I'm gonna get my flashlight because it's gonna be needed. It's dark, it's rainy, and just don't have a lot of light right now. We're also gonna have to take that guy out. This panel through here, that has to come off. And there's a couple different things that have to come out of the way before we can get all the access we need to do the job. All right, so as far as expansion valves go, it seems like they're fairly generic if they're the right type. So I grabbed an ACDelco one. As you can see, it's got the GM stickers. It's part number 191-89786. And first thing I want to do is kind of a stare and compare. Make sure that this looks right-ish. So it comes with a, I think even an adapter there. You can see there's this probe. Now this probe is actually full of freon. It has its own supply. And we have to get that in a very particular place, and then we need to protect it to make sure it can do its job correctly. But taking a look at what's up, we're looking at something. Well, you're not looking at anything because I'm not moving the camera right. Kind of like that. That looks rightish. Doesn't have that little bit sticking down, but it's an expansion valve and it looks to be about the right size, so I'm happy with that. And so we'll move on to taking out more stuff. So good news here, when you go to pull this panel out, is you don't have to worry about these. I don't know if they're actual dowels or they're hidden screws, one or the other, but you don't have to worry about these. You just need to go after the screws that you can see. There is one over there. There are not any in this cup holder. Trying to remember. Oh, that's nice. There you go. That comes out. So you want to take that out, put it to the side somewhere. Just makes life easier. And then there is one screw way down yonder. It's going to be kind of a pain. I apologize. Some of these angles are going to be weird. Got one there, and then a little jumping spider there. And then we need to get that out. But when we take that out, this curtain up here is going to try to fall down. So that's going to be a thing. May want to get a zip tie, zip it up. As soon as you lose tension on both sides, it does weird things. We got to do all that because, like I said, if you look up here, this piece pulls down and out. We're going to have to muscle it around. So let me start pulling some screws here, and I'll report in when I got something to report in. All right, so you can see, had to put a zip tie there, hold the thing up after I took the screw off on that one side. And once you take these two out, this piece will come loose. You're going to have to finagle it a bit, but you can kind of get it up and out. One thing you can also do, if you feel you need to, is if you're working in this exact same van, this is a motorized seat that will fold down into a bed, and it takes up all your trunk space back there, but this is not in your way. It lays down, and it can be easier to work on stuff. So do that if you need, but I need both hands to get this out of the way without damaging stuff. But we can get this up and out, and then we'll get better visibility about what we need to do next. One thing I almost forgot is you've got some power here for these little decorative runner lights that come through here. So they're just spade connectors. Just disconnect them and be mindful of the wire, and you can get this right out of the way. All right, it's gonna be a little difficult to shoot this particular part, but there is hidden underneath the foam, right where my finger is, there's another screw, and that holds this particular piece of particle board to this wooden block. Now this wooden block is attached to this big piece that we need to remove. So we have to take that screw out so we can separate these two pieces so we can work on pulling this guy out. It's another Phillips head. Okay, time for another fun one. If you look in the corner, up above, and I may not be able to get it visible, there is up above a screw in a bracket. It is above the edge of the curtain. The blind's right there. And there's supposed to be two. I think I only put one back. But you gotta take that out. And then down here, we're gonna need to take this piece and bend it out so that we have the room to try to slide this big old chunk out. It's a pain to get out even when you do all this. But your alternative is you have to take this entire piece out right there, that big vertical, and you don't want to do that. That's a whole bunch of... Okay, here is that bracket. Much easier view now that the piece is out of the way. But you can see this one's been, you know, messed with a bit, and that's the one I went for because this one's harder to line up. But now you can see we have all sorts of room for activities, and we can see the entirety of our rear AC system. We also, and this is, you know, got some glue on it, but this is your ducting out. It goes up to the vents into your plenum space. It's all of our relays that we need. It's our fuse. Yeah, whole 9 yards, and you know, there's your ground. So now we can actually talk about how an expansion valve works and what the probe's all about and what we need to do about that. Okay, so check it out. I can get a good grip here. Coming off of our expansion valve, there's a probe. And that probe, if I can get better light, that's better. It loops around and then it goes in, and it's inside of this black ugly mass here. That black ugly mass is called cork tape. It's kind of like electrical tape in that it sticks to itself. It does wear off. But inside of that, it's going to be our probe. Now the probe needs to be very tight against the low pressure line, the bigger of the two lines. And it needs to be wrapped up with cork tape very tight because it needs to be only reading the temperature of the freon that's on the suction pipe, the low end pipe. So this is how this works. Here we go. The expansion valve starts letting in freon gas, right? To do evaporator things, to do the whole AC cycle. And meanwhile, it's monitoring the temperature of the suction side, which is the side the probe's on, right? It's monitoring that temperature. And if that temperature starts getting too high, it sends that temperature down the probe to the valve. Valve opens up more, lets more freon in. More freon comes in, that temperature goes down, drops too much, this is picked up by the probe, closes the valve here, less freon comes through, and in that way it kind of mechanically just is able to regulate the gas based off of the temperature of our probe. So that's why it's important that it stays wrapped up in cork tape or foam tape or whatever you want to use. And now, and it sits in a clamp, so all you got to do is pop it out of the clamp. But first we have to get all this cork tape off, and then we'll have visibility on that. But this is as far pretty much as I'm going today. I just wanted to get all the paneling out of the way. Tomorrow I'll bring the van around and I'll drain all the freon gas out, which I have a recovery machine to do that. And then we actually can switch this guy out, recharge, make sure things are still working, and then we just wrap everything up. We put the panels back. Okay, a couple of things. Here's our clamp. See how it's meant to wrap around the line on one side, and then it tucks in and holds the probe on the other side. I was able just to push that up and off, so not a big deal. Used a box cutter to cut the rest of this cork tape off. So that's all out. The probe is now free. So at this point we are ready to just recover all the freon in the system, and then remove the valve and put it all back together. I'm pretty pleased. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is a new day. So we're at the point now, I went ahead and I recovered all the freon out of my system. Learned something interesting. Just the front AC alone in this vehicle is supposed to take 1.25 kilograms of freon, and I only extracted something like 1.22 or something like that, which means the system was underfilled, which means the problem the whole time might have simply been I didn't have enough freon in the system. But we're this far. We're going to go ahead and change this out. Just something to bear in mind. When you fill a system, pressures will get you close, but really the only true way to know you have enough freon in there is you gotta put in an exact weight of freon, and that's why you need the nice AC machines. Anyway, we have our big nut here. It's a 22 millimeter, and then what you have there is so that you can counterbalance your pull when you're trying to get the nut off, and that is so you don't damage this AC line. That's going to be a 5/8 or metric equivalent. So we're going to pop that one first, and then we'll turn our attentions to this one. This particular nut is a 3/4. That's what this guy is. So we're going to give it a try, and hopefully I do this right, because a replacement one of these is almost $1,000, and I don't know how to braze. So here we go. Okay, got it out. Our big nut there, the 22, that one's really easy to break loose. This little guy, he's harder, this 3/4, because you don't have a good way to isolate force. I got it loose, but I bent that pipe slightly. I was able to bend it back. I don't think the system's leaking. I don't think I broke anything. I hope. But be really, really careful when you do that, okay? So we now have our expansion valve out. I don't really see anything particularly nasty in there. So unless this just mechanically was worn down, there's probably nothing wrong with this valve. But it's also just a $20 part. I don't like the probe here. The probe has rusted up. I don't know if that's because of moisture or a little freon escaped. I have no clue. But I did leave myself an exit plan here. You notice I didn't break anything. So if I put this new valve in and it just does not work, and we're good. Because, I bet that's how you're supposed to do it. I bet you're supposed to come in with your wrench right here to lock onto that and keep it from spinning around. But this, I still have this. It's not broken. I can put it back in line if I need to. But at this point, we're going to take our replacement valve out. We're going to bend the probe roughly how this probe's bent, right? We can't go nuts. It's pretty bendy. Can't go nuts because there is gas in here. And if we've got some O-rings, that would be worthy to change out, because as you can see, there are two O-rings here, one on both connections, and They look okay, but if I have an opportunity to put in a fresh O-ring, I will. Just make sure when you put your O-ring in, make sure you've got a little PAG oil that is R134A compliant, which I do. And we'll lube up those O-rings in PAG oil before we put them in. So I went ahead and did a quick and dirty test fit just to see if it'll go in. Sure enough, it goes in just fine. This one does have a much longer probe line, so we'll have to mess with that a little bit to get that where it needs to be. But this looks good. I happen to have an AC O-ring kit, and I'll throw some new O-rings in there, and then we'll get the probe back on, and then we just got to wrap things up in cork tape. But first we'll refill and test, and then we'll do cork tape. All right, so I've got the probe back in the clamp and the clamp back on the pipe. That was not very fun, and I did have to take the clamp over to my vise and bend it out a little bit so it doesn't pull in as tight. As a result, this thing will move and wiggle a little bit. But that's why also you wrap this sucker up with foam tape. That keeps it from moving, right? So I think it'll be good for what I need to do. And now I'm going to tighten up these connections here and there. And then I'm going to come back over to my AC machine, pull a vacuum, make sure that we have no leaks. If that looks good, I'm going to fill it back up with freon, and we'll do a test to see how we're looking. And if that looks really good, then we'll go ahead, we'll put our cork tape around our probe, and then we're going to put cork tape around the valve as well. And the reason why we're going to do that is that this is going to sweat and drop water, and we don't want this eventually causing rust or shorting something out. So we're going to wrap it up to keep the water from dripping down, since we don't have basically a pan under this for that. That is the next couple of steps. So let me get this tightened up, and then I'll bring you back when we're checking for leaks. Hey guys, this is my AC machine I picked up on Facebook. It's actually a nice one. I need to put more money into it. Anyway, key things to note. We're checking for vacuum on the low side. You'll see that currently we're under quite a bit of vacuum, right? We're pretty pegged out. That's actually in inches of mercury where we are right now. And I'm gonna let this run vacuum for 10 minutes, and then we're gonna see where it is when it stops, and then we're gonna leave it alone for about an hour, and then we'll come back, and if this hasn't really budged, we're good. We don't have any leaks going on, and we can go ahead and fill, which is what we're building up to. But we have to make sure we're not leaking. One good thing I know is that the only place we could be leaking would be those two O-rings that I switched out at the expansion valve. So if we have a leak, we know where it is, right? Anyway, I'll bring you guys back probably at the end of that hour just to kind of see where we are before we start fill, if we make it to that point. All right, it's been an hour, past leak check, and now we're going to see if this is going to behave. And it says I have 1.44 kilograms available in this machine to pump in. I need 1.53, so it's not quite enough, but I'll take what I can get, and then I'll fill the rest with a can. I'll work out the math later, but I'll go grab a can. But right now I want to get some in there and figure out what we're going to need. So what this does is it's vacuuming first, then it'll start to fill. So we're going to see what it does. Alright guys, here's where we stand. One thing I learned about this unit, it will absolutely charge for me, but it can't charge down to the last drop. It needs a certain amount of, I don't know what you want to call it, head pressure maybe, so that it can actually force freon into a system. And my bottle wasn't full enough to do the job. So I pushed in a little over a kilogram. As a reminder, front unit requires 1.25 kilograms. We need a total of 1.53 kilograms to fully fill the front and back. So I will swing by my local Walmart this afternoon. I'll get the rest of the freon that I need, and I will fill the rest of it by hand, which not as accurate. May wind up overcharging a hair, but you know, it is what it is. What I need to break down and do is just buy one of these bottles. You can get them full of freon. They're like $200, but then you have a full bottle of freon and you don't have this problem. And you keep one bottle for recoveries and you keep one bottle for charging. Anyway, I will bring you guys back after I've gotten the freon later this afternoon and I finish topping her off. I am happy to report that the new expansion valve is working, as the system is significantly not full right now. You know, it's at maybe 2/3 of what it's supposed to have. I can't tell you if it's working better or worse, but it is working. We're getting nice wetness on this side of the valve, on this side of it, getting wet and cold like it's supposed to, and then this side staying hot, which is what it's supposed to do. So the top of this valve should be hot, bottom of this valve should be wet and cold, is what you should see. And then where the probe is on the other side back there you go, see the clamp? That should be wet and cold too. So that's working, but the system's not full. We need 1.53, we're at 1.05. We're gonna need a couple of cans. And the annoying part about that is those little self sealers you get from Wally World. You always lose a couple of ounces that don't go in because you can't fully evacuate the can. So you got to buy more than what you actually need. Anyway, I'm blabbing. Let me go take care of that this afternoon. I will bring you back after the system is full, and then we'll do some temperature checks. All right, guys, I'm back. I have put 2 cans of SuperTech in based on what didn't make it in. Probably about right. The front I'm pretty happy with. It makes my eyes water. It's blowing ice cold. The back, I can only get it to blow in like the upper 50s, but pretty sure it's working the way it's supposed to. The big thing here is where the probe is. We need to wrap that up in cork tape so that the probe is only affected by the temperature of the pipe it is up against, instead of the air temperature as well. So it's like I'm feeling it, and I can feel there's that, and I can feel the tip of the probe sticking out. But it's up against, it's in the clip, it's against the metal, but it's also exposed to air right now. So we need to wrap that up so that it's only in tune with temperature on the suction pipe, and that'll probably get us a little better performance. But I'm pretty comfortable now that the level is good as far as the freon goes, and now we're down to things like, you know, is this thing turning as fast as it should, which I believe it is. Doesn't sound like it has any bad bearings or anything. And, you know, is this thing dirty? Well, I don't know, and if I was going to clean it, I should have done that before I filled all this back up. I'm running out of time, as usual. I got to get this buttoned up tomorrow, wrap the cork tape, and see how the performance is, and I will do that tomorrow. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Good morning, everyone. Today is a new day. So I thought I had bought cork tape. I did not buy cork tape. This is foam-backed rubber, self-adhesive rubber tape, which can work. You can also use this. Some people prefer this over cork tape. It's the same basic idea. You can see it's got a paper backing for a sticky side. And we're going to take this, we're going to cut it probably into strips so that we can actually squeeze it in here and do stuff. And then we're just going to peel and wrap and peel. And we need to cover basically anything that's getting cold needs to be covered, because if it's uncovered, it's going to engage in energy transfer with the air around it, which means it's going to absorb energy from the outside air and warm up. And then the system will not work as efficiently as it should. So, if you're doing this on your unit, you want to cover up anything and everything. Basically from about here back, both sides. Though I'm going to wrap the entirety of this expansion valve because I don't want it peeing water everywhere. But that's what I'm doing. It's not exactly glamorous, so I'm just going to do it. I can't get my tripod in a good position for all this anyway. But we're going to get it wrapped up, and then I will idle the engine again and see if that improved the temperatures coming out of the rear vents. Alright, as you can see, AC's running. You can also see I've insulated the valve, the suction line behind it, a whole bunch of this foam tape. So I'm going to let it run for a bit and make sure the valve's not dropping any condensation on top of the blower anymore. I'm going to take some measurements to see if this improves the flow of the cold air temps coming out of the rear vents. And then I'm thinking about, I'm going to take some foam tape and insulate these, because this is another place where cold air gets lost as it's exchanging with the outside temperature, outside environment. So if I wrap up these two ducts, that should help. Alright guys, I'm sitting in the back of the van, and massive improvement on the temp coming out of the vents. I gotta hold it just right. See if I can get it. Yeah, look at that. You gotta hold it just right, but we're pushing 49, 48 degrees from the vents in the back, which I've never had it that cold. I had it around 55, so that's awesome. And that, it went from about 62 to 48 just by wrapping up the probe, wrapping it up nice and tight so that the probe's only seeing what's coming off the pipe versus the outside air. So that's fantastic. Like I said, I think now I'm going to wrap those pipes, and then we'll do this test again, and we'll see if there's any improvement there, which I expect there should be because it's going to add insulation to the pipe. But yeah, I think finally I won't have to listen to my kids going, it's hot back here. Yeah. Yeah, there's 49, 48, and I know you guys probably can't see this very well. Yeah, I'd say 48, 47 degrees. That's a huge improvement. So I started out the morning with 30 foot of foam tape, and that turned into this and turned into that. So I got them roughly the same height. I'm gonna clean up, and then we'll test again, and then I'm putting it all back together. All right, some closing thoughts here. I know the light's not great. Got everything put back together. It's all looks lovely again. I have a restriction, at least in my van, on the left side, because you have two tubes, right? One feeds left, one feeds right. I did an experiment where I moved the tubes around to the two outlet vents coming off the evaporator, and no matter where I moved it, the left one always was a weak flow, and the right one, no matter which side I moved it to, was always a strong flow. So my conclusion is I have a restriction somewhere in here in my plenum space. And I also know that you can actually just pop these guys off their covers and then get in there to that plenum space. So that's going to be another adventure for another day, but I'm going to get an inspection camera and check this out. Check the run all the way back there, because I know the pipes in the back are clear. I checked. But that's gonna wrap this up. We got our expansion valve in. We got it wrapped up tight. It's working correctly. I showed you how to get to it. Reassembly is the reverse of the disassembly. That little screw that's way up in the corner, like, forget that guy. I'm gonna replace him with like a 2.5-inch self-tapper so that it'll just dig into whatever metal bracings up there and it won't be just so horrible to replace. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode where we successfully changed out the expansion valve for the rear AC system of my 1997 Ford E-150 Econoline Starcraft converted van. If you found this video interesting, if you found it entertaining, if you learned something, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. That does help to grow the channel and allow me to bring you more content like this. Also, please leave a comment. I like to read them, I like to learn from them, and I do like to reply to them. And lastly, I make mistakes, so you don't have to. I'll see you guys next episode.